Last week, I did a video explaining why Yu-Gi-Oh! Just never had the longevity of Pokemon. My summation was that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was just never meant to be a rival to the little yellow mouse. Mostly just because of how different the series were, and that aside from having trading cards and being anime, they have nothing in common. It'd be like comparing Mario with Resident Evil.
It seems as though the battle between the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation will be directly related to players' choices between Super Mario 64 and Resident Evil. But which is better?
Huh. Wow. Somebody actually did that. Wow. However, we're going to look at the opposite end of the spectrum today. What Yu-Gi-Oh! Did better than Pokemon on its own merits. While Pokemon had reasons to be able to run as long as it did, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely beats it in a lot of areas. I feel like I was really rough on Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last video. So to rectify that, we're going to go through and look what made Yu-Gi-Oh! Awesome. And cooler than Pokemon in a lot of ways. So let's get started. I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters has the much better storyline. Yu-Gi-Oh! For example had Yami Bakura, a constant threat and force throughout the entire series, often going after villains himself. Most shonen tend to pull the new arc, new villains trope, where mostly everyone from the old slate of villains is gone and replaced by new characters. We see it in Dragon Ball Z. We see it in Naruto. We sort of see it in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, a consistent force in Yami Bakura is present throughout the entire series. Yami Bakura, throughout most of the series, is collecting the Millennium items for some nefarious purpose that we don't find out to the end. Even taking on major villains of the arc for them, like Pegasus, and he challenges Merrick at one point too. And then of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters ending. It's one of the most famous endings in anime history, but spoiler warning for people who haven't seen it yet. Skip ahead to the time mark on screen now. At the end of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yami Bakura is defeated, the Pharaoh passes on to the afterlife, and all shadow magic has been purged from the earth. So, everything's wrapped up with a pretty little bow on top. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh's no Shakespeare or anything, but for an anime about cards and monster fighting and very cheesiness, it has a very good story. I respect it a lot for actually ending despite the huge popularity. They very well could have turned this franchise into a Simpsons or a SpongeBob, but I'm glad they kept it the way they did, with a goal and keeping its appropriate ending, rather than continuing it forever. Pokemon always felt more weekly and episodic, with new characters and villains, and Pokemon of the Week for Ash to catch. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Always seemed the much more continuity heavy. It was one continuous story. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is more mature than Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is clearly meant for a teen audience, while Pokemon was meant for kids. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a ton of skulls, and pentagrams, and occult stuff. Or shoot, look at all the cards I censored for being too graphic. Or for having guns, or blood, or Dark Magician Girl. You won't see that in Pokemon, I'm sure. Plus, all Pokemon are actually cute and cuddly. For the most part, at least. Get that thing away from me! And Yu-Gi-Oh! can be cute too. And plus, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot more unique monsters. For the most part, Pokemon tend to be cute animals, but sometimes there's other things like giant rocks and... But the variety is no match to that of Yu-Gi-Oh! For one, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards actually include humanoid monsters. There's demons, and weird stuff. Pokemon has its unique designs too, but I definitely think Yu-Gi-Oh! Wins the variety battle, as there's something for everyone with Yu-Gi-Oh! If you like cute, you like scary, you like gross, you like realistic, you like really generic, like cards called just Wolf and Bat. Yeah, No points for originality there, folks. But really think about it. There's like 24 Yu-Gi-Oh card types, and each one of them is insanely different. You have spellcasters, which are mostly wizards and witches. You have dragons, all of which look insanely different. There's even some monsters who actually totally lack types, like walking cheeseburgers, or floating killer tomatoes, or carrots that are dressed like professional wrestlers. Come to think of it, why is there no food type? I know I've seen more than 20 cards that are basically just walking animatronic food. There's monsters whose bodies we never see, such as Moisture Creature or Time Eater. And then monsters that aren't even sentient creatures, like a shield, or this casket that has a sword stuck in it, or a floating sword, or an insect cocoon. Why isn't that an equip spell? Weird. Dark moments. When it comes to dark moments, Yu-Gi-Oh for sure is the winner here. Even ignoring the occult stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh has souls being snatched, literal death games, and is actually so dark it had to be censored in a more extreme way. I mean, look at all the characters' backstories that had to be heavily watered down. Of all the dubs 4Kids did, I think aside from One Piece, Yu-Gi-Oh definitely takes the cake for the most heavily edited. I mean, look at how many characters went to the great beyond, so to speak. Merrick's father, for instance, is so damn evil that they couldn't even tell his backstory. And the way he went away is so graphic, they can't even talk about it. It's just ignored in the dub. In fact, the only two characters I can think of who are actually confirmed and spoken of to be dead are Cecilia Pegasus and Noah Kaiba. The rest of the passing on are all prettied up with fancy language like sent to the Shadow Realm, or studying overseas, or too busy to spend time with me. Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh and Kazuki Takahashi pulled no punches here. Now, Pokemon also had moments like this, but Pokemon's moments were more in the sad category and not the scary category. For example, you had Jessie and her Chansey, Pikachu's goodbye, Ash letting Butterfree go, which still makes me cry. God, that was a tearjerker. I hate that episode. But because it's so sad. I hate it because it's so sad. It's Butterfree. Come on. I better move on before I get choked up again. Really, that episode really just... Oh my god. The only truly, really cruel, evil moments in Pokemon I can think of is someone abandoning a Charmander in the rain and just letting it there to move on. You know, that's pretty dark right there, but aside from that, I think Yu-Gi-Oh definitely takes the cake in the more screwed up dark moments battle. Like really, anything Pokemon could do pales in comparison to anything involving this guy. I mean, yeah, they had the pretty scary Sabrina episode. That one, they went full Twilight Zone with that one. But that's really it. That pales in comparison to anything this guy could do. Seriously, nothing in Pokemon will ever beat this moment.
Guys, please help me!
Now for the biggest part. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has My Valentine. Pokemon, however, does not. None of the characters in Pokemon, in my opinion, have what's called waifu potential. I think in terms of waifus, Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely has Pokemon beat. Because it has My Valentine. And in terms of monsters, there's Dark Magician Girl, and a lot of the monsters, definitely get the job done. As for Pokemon, not really. The only one I can really think of is Jessie from Team Rocket. And maybe Nurse Joy or Officer Jenny if you're into police or nurses. No shaming here, folks. However, in my opinion, My Valentine has them all beat. And the best part about My Valentine? She is 24. So, there's no shame about imagining about her, my fellow men of culture. Okay, but seriously, in terms of side characters, I think Yugioh's were a little more dynamic. Now, Ash and Yugi both fit their series. They're both pretty positive and peppy, wide-eyed heroes who love and are passionate about the game featured in their series. However, none of the Pokemon villains are super memorable. And none of them are really downright evil like Yu-Gi-Oh's done. Now, I do consider people like Misty and Brock to be way more developed than Tristan. Poor Tristan. That guy is so out of focus in this show, you could replace him with a freaking houseplant, and nobody would notice. Same with Taya. I think her and Misty are about the same. I mean, Taya, she has her place as the friendship speech, positive influence on the group. And Misty, well, the dub actually cut out a lot of her personality. Misty's kind of the tsundere of the group who, kind of gets angry and slaps around the main character. So, yeah, she's a tsundere, which the dub actually cut a lot of that out. However, I do consider Joey and Brock to be kind of parallels to each other, due to their rough family situation, and being the good big brother to their sibling, or siblings in Brock's shoes. And both have very absent fathers. Kaiba, however, is infinitely more cool than Gary Oak. I mean, Gary Oak, he's a meh rival. Gary Oak is a very mediocre rival. Like, he's the kind of character we see everywhere else. He's pretty much every shonen rival stereotype. He's privileged. He's better than the protagonist. He's more popular than the protagonist is with girls. Same crap we've seen before with every shonen rival. Seto Kaiba, however, is infinitely more cool. In terms of the rival characters like Weevil, Rex, and Mako, I find them a lot more memorable than the rivals we get in Pokemon. But that's just me. Pokemon rivals tend to be a lot more one-off, and a lot less memorable too. Pokemon also has the habit of just casting its own characters aside completely without warning. Granted, Yu-Gi-Oh! Does this too, with the spin-off, new generation sequels it likes to do. And while they have the personality of mayonnaise, at least they stuck around to the end. Heck, they even show up in Dark Side of Dimensions and a lot of the recent other media. They're always there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have this problem with side characters and rival characters, but I mean, there it's more understandable. They weren't main characters like Misty, or Dawn, or Max were, who were just casted off into the same dimension that Chuck Cunningham was banished to. The trading card game. Card games are a matter of preference. Some people like the high difficulty and learning curve of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I can't really weigh in on it since I don't play much of either, but still, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely the most difficult of the two. But it's like comparing a Zelda RPG to a Mario platformer. Like, there's people who prefer playing those insane NES difficult level games, and some people prefer something more casual. However, there is one advantage to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. What I like most is that you can technically recreate the show and LARP like you're in it. In the Pokemon anime, they control the animals themselves, but in the real game, they're cards. No cute animals in sight. I guess unless you have plushies, but still. The anime version and the trading card game version of Pokemon are significantly different. In the anime, you handpick which of your Pokemon to send into battle, and you can only have 6. In the trading card game, you have a full deck, and there's RNG to it. You don't get to put out who you want to. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a significant advantage in that the cards themselves are real, just like in the show. So, you have the cards right from the show. You can actually feel like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Character. While the rules themselves are different from anime to game, you're still playing the cards like the characters did. The only thing missing is the holograms. This is the technology those scientists need to be working on. Who cares about floating cars and making your iPad smaller? We need Yu-Gi-Oh! Holograms, darn it. But yeah, while you can't summon a Pokemon or have a real Pokeball, just like you can't shoot a Kamehameha or run up a tree like Naruto, you absolutely can play a card, just like Yugi. Now let's get into rewatch value. So it's of note that I loved both of these series as a kid. I got into them around the same time, and both were big fixations from my childhood. However, for me, I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the easier one to watch as an adult. I've tried to get back into both, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the one I want to go out of my way to watch. Pokemon feels a little too safe. It just doesn't hold my interest much anymore. You know, I've tried watching it as an adult, and I can't stay invested. I think the best way to compare them is that Pokemon seems more like the show an adult would show their kids because they loved it so much. Like how our parents would show us like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry, what they grew up with. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the show you watch as a kid, then watch later as an adult to pick up on all the little references you missed. Also, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a lot more fun to watch as an adult because with the knowledge that this show was censored, you can try to pick out all the ways it was cut. I mean, as a kid, you're not going to notice any of this stuff. I never gave the finger guns a second thought. Not only that, you can watch the original Japanese sub version and get a glimpse of how unhinged this show really was. Video games. In my first video, I mentioned that the video games were a secret to Pokemon's longevity. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Games are definitely not without merit. These games are hard. Insanely hard. But that's also a good thing. While kids may dislike very difficult games, as you get older, you begin to appreciate them. After all, look at these slop of licensed kid games on PlayStation 2. Most of this was trash. It was all simple kids platformers collectathons with absolutely no depth. So, there was a fair bit of depth to Yu-Gi-Oh! Games. I know I enjoyed a lot of these Yu-Gi-Oh! Games more as a teenager and an adult once I actually figured out how to play RPGs. Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Games actually function more like RPGs. Pokemon games, while they technically are RPGs, they feel more like baby's first RPG. Yu-Gi-Oh! Games tend to be very punishing and difficult with a high learning curve and no support system. No tutorials, no help, pitiful starter decks, good luck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely has a lot more console games, while Pokemon mostly focused on handhelds. Now, as someone who didn't have a Game Boy or a DS, I much preferred playing on console. I mean, Pokemon console games are kind of few and far between. Like, there's not really any full adaptations of a handheld game. They tend to be weird spin-offs like Pokemon Snap. There is Pokemon Stadium, which lets you port your monsters from the handheld versions of the games to battle in 3D. Which, that's something, but there's no way to collect Pokemon or anything. And you can rent Pokemon, but half the fun is seeing the Pokemon you leveled up in 3D with their full stats you gave them. And aside from that, there's some Mario Party mini-games. That's fun, I guess. Okay, seriously though, the Pokemon Stadium minigames kick ass. I love them a lot. But the benefit of being on console, especially for those Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, look at Duels to the Roses, Forbidden Memories, or Capsule Monster Coliseum. They have full 3D models of the monsters, not 2D sprites, and full attack animations. Now how cool is that? Seriously, in those older games, every monster in those games had both a full model and an attack animation. So yeah, while they don't always reflect the trading card game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Games definitely break the mold. You have Capsule Monster Coliseum, which plays a lot like Fire Emblem. You have Duels to the Roses, which is a lot more tactical than just a straight up dueling game. And then you have the Falsebound Kingdom, a full-blown Yu-Gi-Oh! RPG. I stand by what I said last time, that these are two series that should not be compared. They're just too different, but both are awesome, and that's what's important. Really, in my opinion, comparing them is like asking why Sesame Street lasted longer than Teen Titans. Some things are just meant to be permanent fixtures. That's how media works, really. That's why Scooby-Doo, despite being invented in the 60s, is still getting media to this day as late as 2023. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the cool, dark, older kids' teenage show, while Pokemon stay with entertaining the younger kids. Now, of course, appealing to kids, that is the #1 secret to success in entertainment. And that's kind of a secret of the trade to YouTubers as well, appealing to children. Also, a point I noticed wasn't in the first video, a sign that Pokemon was always more culturally relevant. All Pokemon names are recognized by most spell checkers. Microsoft Word, most phone autocorrects, even the built-in spell checker in Google Chrome, all recognize Pokemon monsters. Yu-Gi-Oh!, aside from the ones that are romanjied with English words like Dark Magician, spell check doesn't recognize them. Even the subtitles here on YouTube struggle to read them. Like, I've had Skellingle be translated as, or Skill Angel. No, Skill Angel. Yeah, so that's funny. You know, when I was doing my Let's Play of Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monster Coliseum. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to tune in next time, and I'll see you around. Coming soon, the complete retrospective of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, starting with Duelist Kingdom. See you there, folks. Have a good one.